We're talking today with Mike Woods of Alto, Michigan. The interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Now, can you begin for us by filling in a little bit of your own background? To start with, where and when were you born?
I was born in a small town called Natchez, Mississippi. It's famous today for tourists who like to tour southern mansions. It's called the Pyramid. I was born in 1943. My family left Natchez and moved to New Orleans when I was about 7 years old. So I grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana. Dropped out of high school in the 12th grade. The principal and I had a discussion on how school should be run, and I lost. So after...
up to that point, had you been doing relatively well in school, or...?
I played football. Sports kept me in school. The schools were in poor neighborhoods. The idea of not being able to dress appropriately for school was embarrassing to a number of us. So the sports kept us in school until something happened and we dropped out. I tried to join the Marine Corps when I was 15. I came from a very poor background, and when you live in poor neighborhoods, it's extremely difficult not to be in trouble. My friends were being killed just before I got there, or right after I'd left. So I knew it was a matter of time before I would be involved in something. So I wanted to get out of New Orleans as quickly as possible. The only escape for me, as I could see it, was the Marine Corps. So at 15, I went down to enlist. I had to fill out a mountain of paperwork, of course, and I had to lie about my birthday. And I was caught because I put two different dates on two different pieces of paperwork. So obviously I didn't go. As soon as I turned 17...
Just back up just for just a moment. What motivated you to choose the Marine Corps?
My dad had been in the Marine Corps, was in the Marine Corps. He had been one of the longest serving black Marines at the time. He had gone through the Moffett Point Marine boot camp during World War II. So he was a role model for me. My family wasn't together, but my dad, I saw him twice a year at Christmas time and during the summer. So that was the motivating factor for me to choose the Marine Corps. Besides, the group of kids that I hung around with were tough kids, so that was a challenge for us. You know.
Okay. I'm going to go back at 17.
Yeah, at 17, if my mother signed for me, I could enlist, and I talked her into signing for me, and I enlisted. Went to San Diego for Marine basic training. From there to Marine recruit regiment, which teaches you infantry tactics, and there into a Marine Corps warrior combat outfit.
Okay. Now, can you describe a little bit the actual physical training process? What are you doing at these different stages, and how well did you do with the different parts of it?
I actually graduated from Marine Corps boot camp as the platoon honor man. The platoon honor man is awarded a set of dress blues by the Leatherneck magazine if you're the top recruit in your platoon. I was. Coming from a segregated South, the psychological experience of basic training was extremely challenging. Here's a white guy with a Smokey Bear hat that's in your face 24/7. What I didn't realize at the time, of course, it wasn't just my face he was in everybody's face. But I took it personally. So it was a psychological challenge. Physically, I had been an athlete, played football, basketball, ran track, so it wasn't challenging physically, but certainly psychologically. At that time, Marine Corps basic training was 16 weeks, and I think infantry training regiment may have been 6 weeks. So that was the period of time that you were away from home before you could return.
All right. Now, what did you do to sort of cope with or deal with just the whole stress of that situation you were in? I mean, you're being treated in this boot camp fashion. How did you handle that?
In my platoon, there were, I think we may have started out with about 48 recruits. Of the 48 recruits, there were only 3 blacks, maybe 8 Hispanics, 2 Native Americans. So few minorities. When you had opportunity, you talked to others that were going through the same stressful situation that you were. That helped. Letters from home, that helped. Being put in a leadership role early, believe it or not, also helped. As the platoon honor man, that was the right guide position. The drill instructors held you accountable for the behavior of others. So there wasn't a lot of time to concentrate on your situation. It was a busy time. And I'm not sure that the boot camp isn't set up in just that manner, you know, to keep the recruits' mind off of those things that don't have anything to do with the Marine Corps. And you are busy 24/7. You're told when to sleep, when to eat, etc.
All right. And do you think it helped on some level simply to have recognition? I mean, you were being treated badly on one level, but somebody must have thought you were worth something at the same time. How early did they single you out a little bit?
When you initially report into the recruit training regiment, you are in a holding situation until there are enough recruits to form 3 platoons to start training. One of the things that you recognize early on is if you are assigned a task, you are held responsible for doing that task. If you fail, you are punished to some degree. And if you succeed, you are rewarded to some degree. The system in the military, although stressful and demanding, was the fairest system that I'd been exposed to at the time. I think when you look back at that, that's really what you're looking for. You're looking for where can my ability take me, just based on my personal ability, nothing else, just my ability. And I think boot camp is one of those places, or the military itself is one of those places that operates under that principle.
So you caught on to that fairly quickly and then used it?
Yeah, sure. It was a matter of getting over this guy in my face 24/7. That didn't happen right away. But about halfway through training, you started to understand that you weren't in this boat by yourself. There are 48 people here. And some of them are hurting worse than I am, and they're not black, okay? So once you catch on to that, then you understand you're being judged on your leadership qualities, your perseverance, and your can-do attitude. Those were the people that were awarded the promotions, PFC, and given the responsibilities.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, you have sort of 16 weeks of basic and then some additional infantry training beyond that, the other 6 weeks or whatever, and that's all in the same place?
No. Basic training was in San Diego, in the city of San Diego, downtown. The infantry training regiment training was at Camp Pendleton, in the mountains of Camp Pendleton, if you think of California as having mountains in that area. That training was about infantry tactics. What are the duties of a squad leader? How does a squad work as a unit of a platoon? What is the smallest unit in the Marine Corps, which is the fire team? How does interlocking fire work? How is that integrated into artillery fire, etc.? So you go through 6 weeks of that. You're exposed to the gas chamber, and you understand that right quick. So it was quite different. You are treated a little bit above a recruit. You're now called Marine, but your activities are still controlled on a 24/7. You do get an opportunity to have liberty. That means to go in town. And I think of the 6 weeks, we may have had an opportunity to do that 2 or 3 times.
All right. And then once you complete that course, what happens next?
Then you are given 20 days leave, so you can go back home. The experience of leaving this training and going back to be with your buddies after this period of time is amazing. You find you don't have anything in common with them anymore. You find that the things that they are doing seems childish and not grown up. So you lose that connection that you've had with these these friends. They're still your friends, but you look at them in a different way. And you start feeling differently about yourself. You see yourself as a cut above, maybe. Maybe that's arrogance, but it's true. It's true not only from my perspective, but from others that I've shared this with.
All right. So you have that moment. I don't know, did your family notice the difference? Or?
Yeah, I think they did. Although my mother still thought that I should be in by 10 o'clock at night. And we had to have a discussion about that. I'm now an adult. But yeah, the difference was noticed by my family. Obviously, they were pretty proud. I had graduated from what was considered one of the toughest basic trainings of the military service, and I had done it with honors. So not only was my parents proud, but it managed to get in the local newspaper. So, yeah.
All right. Now, where did they send you next?
From there, I was sent to, I'm trying to remember that each battalion or regiment has a different area of Camp Pendleton. So I went to Camp Pendleton to the Delta 17, which is Delta Company, 1st Battalion, 7th Marine Regiment, which is a part of the 1st Marine Division. The 1st Marine Division home is at Camp Pendleton, California. But there are different camps. There's Margarita, which is the home of the 5th Marine Regiment. There's Onofre, which I think is where the 7th Marines were located, and then there's another area for the 1st Marine. So I think I was at Camp Onofre. During this time, I'm a new recruit reporting into a combat unit, and there's a cycle that you must go through. And the way that cycle works is that the guys that had just come from a 13-month tour in Okinawa or in the West Pac stay behind to train the new recruits that come in, and that's called a 6-week lock-on phase. Again, it's integrating the squad tactics into the platoon tactics, into company tactics, and up to battalion and regiment. So you pull operations, combat operations against other units at Camp Pendleton, and that lasts for about 6 weeks during this lock-on phase, and you are actually preparing to make your 13-month tour overseas. Once that 6-week lock-on phase is over, then the guys that stayed behind to train you are transferred out of the infantry into support units. So after we finished the lock-on phase, I was then transferred, my unit, the whole unit, was then transferred from the 1st Marine Division to the 3rd Marine Division, which is in Okinawa. So the company then became I Company, 3rd Battalion, 3rd Marines.
Okay. Now, when you were in that lock-on phase, when you were doing the 6 weeks with the people returning back from overseas, what was this, 1963 or still 62, or remember roughly when that was?
Yeah, I think that we actually left to go over to Okinawa in January of '63 because I was married and my daughter was born several days before I got on the ship. So we went overseas in '63.
Okay. And part of why I'm asking that is sort of when you're getting, the veterans giving you additional sort of tactical training and so forth, these were not really people who were combat veterans yet, were they? They had still been on peacetime duty, or had anyone been to Vietnam by then?
No. There was a presence in Vietnam, but what was there was mostly Army, and they were trainers rather than combat troops. That was a term used for them, which I can't remember right now. So no, they were not combat troops. I don't think the Marine Corps had seen combat since maybe the Korean conflict at that time. And
so that would mean that the kind of tactics that you were learning were still fairly conventional warfare, or what would have been done in Korea or even World War II.
That's correct.
That kind of thing. All right. So now you're sent over and you go to Okinawa. How do they get you physically out to Okinawa?
The USS Man, which is considered a troop transport. At that time, everyone going over went over by ship, and you were a part of the fleet. That was usually a carrier, some battleships, and the troop transport ship. So the whole regiment went over by ship.
All right. And what was that trip like?
For a person that had never been on a ship before, it was exciting and it was sickening. One of the duties when you're on ship, of course the Navy is in charge, but Marines have duties on ship. I was assigned to the laundry, And the laundry is in the very bottom of the ship where it's always hot and sweaty and steaming. On the way over, you go through what's called Typhoon Alley. So if you take this trip at a certain time of the year, you can pretty much bet you're going to hit a typhoon, and we did. Well, when you hit a typhoon, the ship's bow moves up and down in the water. And if you're down in a very hot and steamy area, you will learn quickly what seasickness really is. So needless to say, I got seasick, and I was in my bunk, and I thought I was going to die. And I was so sick that it was the first time I refused an order. When I was told that it was time to go to work, I said, I am not getting out of this wreck. Well, they figured out I was sick, so I didn't get court-martialed or anything, but I was sick for 2 days before I could finally get out of that bed. So that was a 30-day voyage, I think, and it's a straight-through voyage. After the storm and after the seasickness, then you spend your time on ship playing whist. That's the card game of choice until you get over. You bond during that time with a lot of people.
All right. And then you get over to Okinawa, then what kind of setup did you have there, or what kind of duties did you have?
Okinawa is an island that's about 12 miles wide and about 60 miles long. I actually think it's the most populated area per square mile on Earth. During that time, your money had to be converted to yen. That was 360 yen to $1 to show you where the economy is now and how far they've come. There were no paved roads. Most of the road, well, the main road was paved, but all other roads were dirt roads. There were areas in Okinawa that catered to white military and areas that catered to black military. Only one area for the blacks. It was called the Four Corners, or Koza, Okinawa. Koza was quite a taxi drive from where my unit was. So the idea is to make sure that the last taxi doesn't leave at night so you can get back to the base in the morning. It was the first experience with a foreign culture, primarily Japanese, but they're really Ryukins, they're not Japanese. Picked up a little bit of the language, enjoyed the people, but at 17 or 18, you are about learning the wild side of life, so not too much cultural experience, but certainly some. From Okinawa, you will become what's called a floating battalion. The Marine Corps has a battalion that's on the water 24/7 year-round, and they're ready to hit any hot spot in the Far East. So you are a ready battalion. You're floating with a fleet, and some of the stops that you will make would be maybe 3 days in Hong Kong for R&R, rest and relaxation. You may pull jungle warfares and problems in the Philippines, so you may be there for 3-4 weeks. So we had an opportunity to go to the Philippines. Taiwan was another port of call. That's exciting. So you're exposed to many different cultures. Cold weather training at Mount Fuji, Japan. So you get an opportunity at the base of Fuji, is a little Japanese village called Moji, Japan. You get a chance to pull some liberty there. You get exposed to the cuisine, which I really enjoyed. It took me a minute to eat sushi. Didn't find anything in Japan that I wouldn't try. Didn't particularly like seaweed, but in the Philippines I ran into something that I couldn't force myself to try. There's what we would consider a delicacy, but they eat on a regular basis. It's called a balut. A balut is a embryo that's not complete, that's in the egg. It's buried in sand to mature, and the way you eat it is to crack the shell, and there's this little guy looking up at you, and you... So regardless of how much sake I drank, I couldn't bring myself to eat it. So that was interesting too, so I tell the story quite often.
Okay. Now, did you also go to Korea, or did you not get there?
We did go to Korea. We pulled a problem in Korea. It was an amphibious landing. We were there for maybe a week, but not outside of the field. We didn't visit or pull liberty in any of the towns in Korea.
All right. So you had, now, if you're practicing amphibious landing, is that climbing down into landing craft?
Yes, it is.
All right.
Another experience, especially if the waters are rough. You come down off of a ship on a cargo net. Now, you are fully combat loaded. At the time, I think I was in machine guns. So not only are you carrying probably a 70-pound pack, your rifle and a machine gun, if that's what you're doing, you're really loaded. And as you come down, the waves bob up and down. So it's a possibility that you can put your left foot down off of this cargo net, and it's touching the bottom of the boat, but by the time you get your next foot down, the boat is down there. So needless to say, a lot of people fell off. The boats are interesting because they had old life preservers, the kind that you put on and the back of it was so big your head was tilted forward. The boats, the PT boats that you get in, the amphibious vehicles, they circle in the water and they have to wait until everybody is loaded before they start to the beach. That's always good for seasickness, if not from you, from the guy that's puking on you from behind or next to you. And then once the signal is given, then to the beach you go. That can be another interesting experience. Remember, you're carrying this heavy equipment, and depending on how far the sand barge is out, depends on how close to the beach the landing craft can get. And if the sand barge is out, when you jump off, you could be in water up to your chin, or you could land right on the beach. I was always the unfortunate guy.
All right. Now, were these kind of old-fashioned World War II style landing craft
They
with
were.
a door that drops down the front?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So you weren't going in tracks or amphibious vehicles yet or things like that?
No, this was 1963. We were still a conventional warfare force.
Right. Okay. So you spend, and then did you spend then a full year based in Okinawa, or using that as your central base and then going out? And how much time do you think you spent on the ships as the battalion at sea or in foreign places rather than Okinawa?
Yeah. I think the floating battalion phase of that tour, maybe 3 or 4 months. I don't remember exactly. Maybe 3 or 4 months. And during that floating phase is when you stop at these different ports, Hong Kong, Korea, the Philippines, and Taiwan. The time that you spent ashore was really based on how long the operation would be. So it wasn't, you weren't there any great length of time. Most of your time was actually spent on the water. When the President Kennedy was assassinated, we were the floating battalion at that point. I remember woke up early that morning, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and being told that the president was assassinated, and I rolled over and went back to sleep. Guys are playing jokes on each other all the time, so I didn't believe it. And of course, the next morning, there was a formation on the deck to tell us that that had really happened. Now, during that floating battalion phase 2, also, is our first introduction to Vietnam. The new regime was in place. I had just overthrown the old regime, junta, that was there, and because we were the floating battalions, our mission was to go in and pull out the American civilians. We had actually been transferred to an aircraft carrier. We had been issued 5 rounds of ammunition and flat gear. We were on the deck of the Riscony and ready to board helicopters when the new regime had promised the American civilians safety, and we called off the operation. And that was 1963. So that was our first experience with Vietnam. I never even heard of the country before that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then how much longer then were you kind of in Okinawa after that?
Well, after your floating battalion, you come back and you then are probably the senior regiment on the island, and your preparation for leaving. When we came back, there was I was involved in a track and field. I ran a relay. I was a member, the Marine Corps had 3 football teams over there, the Streaks, Strikers, and the Royals, so I played for the Streaks. So it's sort of a downtime. You do some operations, but you're not in the field nearly as much. It's a good time. It's a time to get out and mingle with the public. If you're an athlete, you can participate, that sort of thing. Yeah. So maybe we were rotated within the next 3-4 months. So.
Okay. Now, when they rotate you out, what happens to you next?
Okay. Remember, at this point, you're a unit. You're a part of a regimental unit that's moving from place to place. So on your rotation back to the States, the first thing that happens is you have 30 days leave coming. So you're on vacation for 20 or 30 days. Interestingly enough, I found that if I took a 20-day vacation and went back to New Orleans, I was so bored that I may stay 15 days and go back to the base, you know. Or if it was 30 days, maybe I'd stay 20 and go back. But once you get back, then you are the senior people in the company, and you're waiting for the recruits to come in so you can take them through their 6-week lock-on phase. So you've completed a cycle. Now, once that cycle is completed, what is supposed to happen is that you now receive orders out of a combat unit into a support type unit, truck company, supply company, etc. Most of my friends that came back with me, we had taken the new recruits through the lock-on cycle, and we were waiting for orders. And most of my friends had received their orders. I was waiting. Kind of alphabetical, I guess, Woods, you know. Well, while I'm waiting for my orders, boom, Vietnam. So the first combat unit of any size to leave, Marine unit to leave, was about to happen. They were now filling these units. We weren't the first unit to go to Vietnam. The first unit to go had come from the brigade in Hawaii. They had already gone. So this was the stateside unit. And what they were doing was beefing up the 7th Marine Regiment. Now, that's where I started off. I'd gone to Okinawa and I'd become the 3rd Marine Regiment. I'd come back to the States in the 5th Marine Regiment, and now I receive orders right back to the same company, the same battalion, and the same division where I started, Delta Company, 1st Battalion, 7 Marines. So, a tour of duty overseas is 13 months. At this point, I had about 8 months left to do in the Marine Corps. So how can you send me back over for a 13-month tour? So when I reported in, the first thing that I did was request mass. That means you want to see the seal. And my complaint is that I've just come back from an overseas tour. I shouldn't be here. I only have 8 months to do. And he looked up from his desk and said, "I'm in the same boat reporting to your platoon." So I did. The Marine Corps solved the problem for me, though. What they did was to give everyone in the Marine Corps a 4-month involuntary extension. So I had my 13 months to do. From there, I reported into Delta 17, obviously, and back to Okinawa we went. Because we were the first group to leave the States to go over, and remember, as we spoke earlier, we were a conventional warfare organization. We had to quickly learn jungle warfare tactics. So there's a part of Okinawa that's in the northern portion in the hills. It's called the Northern Training Area, NTA. So NTA had trainers set up to teach us guerrilla training, to expose you to what a punji pit is, and some of the booby traps that the Vietnamese would set up. My company was the first company to go through the training. As a result of that, we became the host company. We trained the rest of the battalion and the regiment that moved up. After NTA, we then went to Vietnam. The area for us was Chu Lai area. Chu Lai was on the Santraban River, and our job was to control the river. The river had a small island in the middle, so boats going down the river would one side and coming the other way on the other side. We had a 106 Hauser, which is a big artillery piece, set up on a hill. And the way you aim the 106 is with a 50 caliber that sits on the top of it that fires tracer rounds. So if you want to hit something, you shoot the 50 caliber with the tracer round, and wherever that tracer round hits, you fire the big gun, and that's where it will land too. To give you an idea of the impact of a 106, if you are laying on the ground next to one that goes off, you raise up off the ground. So it's a heavy weapon. That would be a squad that's down on the island, and they would stop the boats, search the boats, and check identification. Occasionally, you would get a boat that would run the block. So you'd call up to the 106, and you would identify the boat, and then the 106 would take care of that. So we stayed on the San Juan River and pulled operations from there. The interesting part about that setup is that the first night that we moved in to relieve Charlie Company, who had been there before us, the VC came over our radio signals and told us that they would see us tonight. Well, we haven't had combat, and we are young and gung-ho, so we welcomed them. That night they came in. They came in through barbed wire, concertina wire, trip flares, claymore mines, mosquitoes as big as helicopters, and they came in nude with the exception of their cartridge belts and weapons. They crawled in, and the reason they were nude is because you can feel what touches your skin as you're moving, so they didn't set off anything. When we knew they had come in, they were in our command posts throwing grenades in tents. Needless to say, that was a tense night. The next morning, there were bodies everywhere. We repelled them with a minimal amount of casualty. From there, we went on 2 sweeps where we backed the North Vietnamese up to a river. They had no escape. So they came out, and that was conventional warfare. That's Marine Corps game, so that was over. Another operation that we went on that sticks in my mind more than the others is one morning we were to mount the helicopters in a battalion-size operation, hit an LZ, a landing zone, and sweep an area. Well, we got to the landing zone about dusk, just about dusk. We ran some patrols to see what was in the area, and we ran into a unit, and this was my squad that was on patrol, that we couldn't tell how large it was because we were approaching a rice paddy dike, turning left, and one of the guys picked up a Vietnamese unit on the other side of the dike, turning left also, going in the opposite direction. Got on the radio to find out if we had friendly troops. We did not, so we engaged them in fire. They did not return fire. We don't know what size unit it was. So you have to report that to intelligence. After our patrol, we're back in the area. Some sniper fires coming off the hill. My team goes up. We look for the sniper. We can't find him, but he knows where we are because you can hear bullets whizzing past your ear, and you can hear them as they cut the air. It makes a whizzing sound. So we thought that he won that day, so we came back off the hill without finding him. By the time we gave our report, we saw the Hueys some miles away over a hill, and it was about 5 of them, and they were lighting the hill up. So we knew somebody is in trouble. Well, there was a term used in Vietnam, and the term was called Sparrowhawk. And Sparrowhawk is a rescue unit, and that title is assigned to different units at different times. What that means is, if there's an organization in the field and they run into more than they can handle, they're up on the radio and they call Sparrowhawk. Your unit then is supposed to go to their rescue. We were the Sparrowhawk for this unit that was being hit. So even before we could eat, we had to pack up and start up that hill. As we moved up the hill in the twilight, it's a good thing we had to move because we could see that the unit that we had shot up was a massive size unit, and they were moving in on our positions as we were moving up the hill. We humped most of the night, and the hills were extremely steep. The guy in front of me was carrying a 3.5 rocket launcher. And I know he was hurting because in addition to that, he had to carry his rifle and his rifle ammo and stuff. And several times I thought I should help him, but I was hurting myself. We took several breaks, and we got to the unit at dawn the next day. These guys had walked into or been lured into an ambush that had been pulled off by a battalion size of Vietnam, and they had destroyed this unit. There were bodies everywhere. There was one guy in this unit who was hiding behind a rock, and he was saying, "Don't go over there. They're over there too. They're all over the place. They're everywhere." And when the corpsman got to him, they had to evacuate him. He was, what he had seen had upset him quite a bit.
Was this a company-sized unit?
It was a company-sized unit.
And how much of it was left, do you think?
What I saw, was maybe 8 guys. What we picked up, my squad, I was squad leader at the time, and we were assigned an area to pick up bodies and load them on LZ. We must have picked up 18 bodies. Mm-hmm. Now, there were other squads doing the same thing. You didn't see the whole area. So my memory hits me is because I thought that I had assigned my squad to do all of the bodies. Everybody had an assignment, and we lost one that was later saw in the bush. So a team leader of mine and I had to carry this guy, and we were carrying him on a poncho, and I was in the front, and his arm fell out of the poncho, and every time I took a step, it hit the back of my leg. This arm was hanging by a thread. This guy he was shot from his feet to his head. It must have been one hell of a battle because no one had any ammo left. This was a serious fight. For a long time, I could wake up at night and feel that hitting in the back of my leg. Where his blood had gotten on my utilities, it was there. When I got an opportunity, I threw them away. I could always smell it. You can't get rid of the smell of death. The other incident that sticks out in my mind was maybe a week before it was time for me to rotate out of the unit. When we reported into the 7 Marines down at Camp Helmand prior to going to Vietnam, your unit cohesion was broken because you're pulling Marines from all over the Marine Corps to fill a unit. It's not a unit that you've been with. So you go overseas with some new guys that you have to bond with. And the ones that you bond with best are those that you work more closely with, which your fire team, which is 4 guys, your squad, which is 13 guys. So my squad, before I was promoted to squad leader, which was a result of an ambush, my team consisted of a guy named Teehee, a Native American from a reservation in Arizona, I think. John J. Ganelli, boxer, Italian from Hoboken, New Jersey. O'Brien, big, real, strong Irish guy that smoked cigars, and me. So they kind of called us the Mod Squad, and we were real proud of that. In fact, we would volunteer to take the duties that others didn't want because we knew a secret. We would volunteer for point on all patrols, and we ran patrols every 3rd day. The reason we volunteered for the point is because when you walk into an ambush, unless it's an L-shaped ambush, they usually let the point pass and hit the main body. In addition to that, you are the eyes and ears of the squad or the platoon. So you know what's going on and you have control and direction. We enjoyed that. So we would volunteer for the point. This patrol that we went on was an interesting patrol because the last time we had moved into the same area, we could see where the VC had been improving their position. We got hit every time we went into this village. But this time, it was different. They hit us, and you could see that the positions were being improved. So the night before the patrol is when the squad leaders would meet with the platoon commander. We would get our marching orders, who's going to be on the flank, who's going to be point, what direction we're taking, etc. And when the squad leader came back to meet with the team leaders, me, he gave us this patrol route, And I said, does Lieutenant remember that they are improving these positions and we're walking into this stuff? If we take this route, it's going to be Purple Heart Day. Did you tell him that? And the squad leader said, no, you go tell him. I said, okay, I will. So I did. I went to talk to the lieutenant and made a suggestion on how we might avoid this. And he gave me a lesson on military tactics. And my suggestion, we were going to split machine guns, and you never split your machine gun. So we're up, and we have the point again. So I met with my team, and we had to go across this rice paddy dike, which is only 3 feet wide, maybe. And once you get on the other side of the dike, you're into the village. The idea was for us to run as fast as we could across this dike. As soon as we get on the other side, rather than proceeding to the core of the village, we're going to set up a perimeter until the rest of the platoon gets over, and then we'll pick point up again. But we don't want to get this separated, not with these improvements that we've been seeing. So we set up on the side of the dike before the run, and I said, go. And for some reason, Ganelli is the point, Teehee's behind him, and they ran halfway to the dike and stopped. And as soon as they stopped, the 4th of July happened. Everything just broke loose. The first round got Ganelli, and we used to wear our magazines upside down. We had M14s, not 16s. It was easier to get them out that way. The first round hit him and took the magazine guide into his leg, so it got him right in hit the femur vein. He was bleeding quite a bit. When things calmed down, took us a while to get the helicopter in. It was extremely hot, like it always was. Gangrene had already started to set in. Finally, we got him evacuated, and I never saw him again, but my understanding is he lost part of his leg. The reason that bothers me is because Ganelli came from a fighter family. His uncle and his dad, his cousin, they were all boxers. So when his tour was up, that's what he was going to do. Now, he had been training since he was a young kid, and he was good. He was good. So Ganelli's never realized his dream, you know. Squad leader got killed that day, so I then got promoted to squad leader. Before that day was over, we walked into 3 ambushes, 2 going out, 1 coming back. The one coming back was the one that was a surprise. We'd taken the route out several times, but we had a different route coming back because it looked like they were setting up for us again. So we changed the route. They still hit us. What we found out later is our interpreter was a VC. So they had signals and everything that we were doing, they knew that we were doing. That was maybe 4 or 5 days before we was to rotate. At that time, you rotated by the numbers. If 5 new guys came in and your number was 1 to 5, then you were on your way out. If your relief was in, then you didn't have to go on this patrol. Your relief would go on the patrol. So for my team, all of us had a relief that was in. So this was it. This was the last patrol for us. So to be on your last patrol, and it was a weird time in America.
Now, you were there for the in this area for 13 months, or?
No, out of the 13 months came the training cycle on Okinawa.
Mm-hmm.
So we probably actually did in country maybe 10 months.
Okay. And over the course of that time, were you kind of repeating a lot of the same activities and patrolling the same areas and doing the same things?
Yes, most of the time that we were there. A day went like, you came off patrol, and there was always a poker game or a dice game or some sort of a gambling game going. Many guys would come off patrol and sit in on a game and may stay there until time for the next patrol. If you were in a quiet area, and we did move to other areas from time to time, Engineers had blown out a swimming hole for us, so you could go swimming. There was a softball field that was set up back in that area, so unless intelligence was telling you that your unit is going to be attacked, you try to make life as normal as possible. Occasionally, like when they came in through the barbed wire, you would be hit. Occasionally, you would get snipers or mortars. There was a village that was maybe a half mile from us. Occasionally, we would send a squad out to set up ambushes to see if we could catch anything coming into the village. Occasionally, on their way out to set up an ambush, they would walk into an ambush. Sometimes we'd go on a patrol and drop off part of the unit, say maybe in a hedgerow, to set up an ambush, and then you come out that way. So you were supposed to be fooling the local populace. They wouldn't know that you dropped them off, but 5 minutes later the kids out looking at you, so they knew that you were there. And then occasionally there would be a large operation that your unit would be a part of, so some of your unit would go. We were also doing some stuff in Laos at the time. And we weren't doing this as a unit. They were pulling some people out of units, putting them in units, and sending them to Laos when we weren't supposed to be there. Mm-hmm. In fact, if my rotation replacement hadn't come in, I was scheduled to be one of those. There were occasions when we worked with what was called cat platoons, which was with the South Korean military. We pulled operations with them. They were an interesting group. They were extremely disciplined, and we worked with the Rock Marines, is what they were called, as Korean Marines. So we'd exchange emblems. Their emblems were a little different than ours. That was an interesting experience.
Right. Did you have any sense of whether or not you were really accomplishing anything or changing anything, or did you not have enough of an understanding of the larger political situation to think like that?
I didn't. I was an 18-year-old that was uneducated, that had the broad stroke. We're here to stop communism so there won't be a domino effect. Now, what does that mean? I don't have a clue, and neither did anyone else. You know, you got more of a picture of what Vietnam was about when you came back to the States. No, I had no clue. I remember I was in Vietnam when Ali refused the draft, and I said, if I'm here, he should be here. I don't know what the heck he's talking about. Of course, we weren't getting daily news on what was going on back in the States. You were getting bits and pieces of the news. So no, we didn't, from a political perspective, no, I had no clue. I was an 18-year-old uneducated person.
Now, what impression did you have of just the Vietnamese population itself generally? Was it positive or negative, or just didn't understand them, or?
I didn't personalize the war against the Vietnamese people. I did understand that these are governments going to war for whatever their government ends are. The Vietnamese that we work with, I didn't treat them any differently than I would treat anyone else. As a matter of fact, I'll give you another funny story. Highway 1 was the major highway through Vietnam, and there were a lot of buses that went through. And we had a checkpoint there for a while. Everyone had to get off the bus, and we had to check their ID cards, check the bus, and then let them go on their way. Well, we were set up near a village. Our campsite was set up near a village. And the mamasans, the women, would have to go out and gather wood. And they had these yokes that would go around their neck. They balanced them with their hands, and there were big baskets on both ends of these yokes. And they would fill them up with firewood and bring them back every evening. Well, one evening, this mamasan had this big, heavy load of wood. And I can't let this woman carry this big, heavy load of wood up that hill, so at least I'll carry it to the top of the hill for her. So I said, she couldn't speak English, but through gestures, mamasan, let me carry that for you. No, 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 no. Let me carry that. I'll carry it to the top of the hill, and then you have it. Okay. I got under this yoke, and couldn't lift it. And I couldn't believe that. I tried to do it again. I couldn't lift it. She laughed, got under the yoke, and trotted to the top of the hill. So I was real impressed. Yeah.
All right. So when then did you leave Vietnam off that tour?
Well, when you leave Vietnam, you leave based on your number, and then you're back to Okinawa.
Right.
And then from Okinawa is where you come back to the States.
And so was it 64s when you left, or 65 by then, or?
I'm pretty sure it must have been 64.
Okay.
Yeah, 64. So processing out Okinawa and then flying back, I think I came in through San Francisco, and then on leave before you were put into your next unit. Next unit was Quantico, Virginia. The rule was you caught on this 4-month extension when you get back to the States, and I can't remember exactly what the time frame was. It was either if you had less than 30 days to do, you could be discharged, or it was less than 60 days, you could be discharged. And I had either 34 or 30 or 64 days, so I couldn't be discharged. So they sent me to Quantico, Virginia, to the casual company there. And there were 2 events that's of interest there. The place, disbursing is where you settle all pay issues. So once I got to Quantico, I had some pay issues. I had to turn in my records. So I'm walking to Lejeune Hall, which is where disbursing is. Coming toward me is 2 women Marines. There's a car parked on a curve. And right across the street is the .45 pistol range. So as I'm walking toward these women, going to Lejeune Hall, they opened fire on the pistol range, and under that car I went. The women thought that was funny, but that was a survival reaction. Initially I was a little embarrassed, but after that I really wasn't, you know, and that's what I'd been doing for almost a year. The other thing that happened at Quantico is they made me this cross-country chaser, and I was given an assignment to go pick up a deserter. So they give you a little history of why the guy deserted, and this guy was a tough guy, and he had attacked some guards, and yada yada. And you have to go to the armory, you check out your weapon. I think you had 5 rounds of ammo, but you're not supposed to load the ammo and so forth. So there's a driver of the vehicle when we picked him up. The vehicle is covered in the back, and you and the prisoner sit in the back. So they told me about how bad this guy was, so I put a magazine in my chamber, jacked around and took the safety off. By this time, this guy's panicky. Hey, you're not supposed to do that. I said, all right, you know, just sit in the corner, be still. You don't have anything to worry about as long as you be still. When we got back and I turned him in, he reported me. And they asked me, did I put a round in the chamber and did I take the safety off? I said, yeah. So why? I said, well, you know, this guy's attacked other people. He's a bad guy. I just wanted to make sure that he wasn't going to attack me, you know. So that was the last time they sent me out to pick up anyone. So I just waited for about 34 days to be up, and I was discharged. Got out of the Marine Corps, and the Urban League got me a job at D.H. Holmes, which was a large department store. And what I did was finish shoes that had been purchased but returned. So you had to sand the bottom and put them back on the shelf. The first payday came around, and you didn't get a check, you got a pay envelope. And the supervisor that I had gave me the pay envelope, and when I looked at my pay, I was missing money. I said, don't we pay X number of dollars an hour? Yeah, that's right. I said, other than taxes, is there something else being taken out? He said, no. I said, well, this isn't right. That's not enough money. He said, well, I don't know about that, and turned around and walked away. Well, the guys tell me that occasionally this guy takes money out of your pay envelope. Well, I worked 1 more week there and I quit. The next job that I got was at the top of the International Trade Mart in the Canal Street tall building. As a dishwasher. And we had to argue over whether or not I would be paid minimum wage, because that sort of job you don't have to pay minimum wage. I'm not going to work for less than minimum wage, but even minimum wage was not enough to get paid on a Friday, take a girlfriend to a movie, give my mother some help out some money at home, and have a nickel left in my pocket. So that didn't work. The only thing I could think of is let me go back in the Marine Corps to kind of figure this out. What am I going to do in life? You know, this isn't working. So I came back in the Marine Corps for a change of MOS, infantry MOS, military occupational specialty, is 0311. So I came back in for 0361, which is postal, and was sent to El Toro, California, which is no longer there, expensive property. Stayed at El Toro for a while, and from there, another overseas tour. Came back.
Well, where did you go on the overseas tour?
You go to Okinawa, but let me tell you what happened. Most of the Marine Corps that serves in the Far East is from Okinawa, but there's a wing in Iwakuni, Japan. So by this time, I've been overseas 3 or 4 times, and they've all been in Okinawa. So this set of orders are for Iwakuni, Japan. I'm happy. I'm going to see something else. So I was to transfer, go to Okinawa, transfer, another jet's going to take me to Iwakuni. When I get to Okinawa, I'm met at the airport by an old postal friend of mine by the name of Gaio Legajo. Woods. Oh, last time I saw Legajo, he was an enlisted man, and now he's a warrant officer. Mm-hmm. Okay. Woods. Man, I'm so glad to see you. I heard you were coming over. That's why I came down to meet you. Guess what I've done? What have you done? I got your orders changed. You what? I've got your orders changed. You're going to work for me here. I said, look, Legajo. I'm getting a chance to go to Iwakuni, man. I've been to Okinawa. You got my orders changed? Yeah, but let me tell you what I got one to do for you. You're going to be the postal inspector for the island. Well, that calmed me down a little bit. That was an interesting job. I had 2 guys working for me. So I ended up staying in Okinawa again. My last overseas tour was in 1979. From there, I came back to San Diego, and from San Diego, I was discharged. But I had some interesting duties. I was a recruiter, so you go to recruiter school in Parris Island, South Carolina. It was my first introduction to the Midwest. My original order sent me to Chicago. Chicago had a substation in Michigan City, Indiana. So they sent me there. I was there for about 4 days, and because it was called Michigan City, I didn't realize I was in Indiana, so the first letter I wrote home, I told them I was in Michigan City, Michigan. From there, Michigan City had a permanent contact station in Benton Harbor, Michigan, so I ended up spending 3.5 years in Benton Harbor, Michigan. Once you've done independent duty, which is the drill field, I'd been on drill field. I was hand-selected to be instructor at drill instructor school. I taught the leadership package. Once you've had those kind of duties, you pretty much can choose where the duty station is that you want. So San Diego was a choice for me. Enjoyed the environment. The economy was bad. My wife, who-to-be, had visited me there for a number of times, and she wanted to leave Michigan when I got out of the Marine Corps, and we'd live in Michigan, in San Diego. But she was upwardly mobile here, and we had gas lines. Carter was the president at the time. So we decided to settle in Grand Rapids, Michigan, until we decided where we wanted to live when the economy got better. And once I got here, I saw how far my dollar could go, and that this was a community unlike the others in Michigan. So we built and got a job at Grand Valley, and here we are.
Okay. Let's back up a little bit to the point where you had gone back, you had re-entered the Marine Corps, and so forth. So you're in the Marine Corps kind of in late 60s and on to 82. Did you ever have any pressure to go back to Vietnam, or was there a prospect of going back to Vietnam in, say, 67, 8, 9, 70 in there when we had a lot of soldiers over there?
There were a lot of things going on at that time, and there was some pressure to go back to Vietnam. There was an old saying that said there were only 3 types of Marine: There were those in Vietnam, those leaving, and those coming. So it was pretty much like it is now. There were not as many tours. Guys now have spent as many 5 tours in Iraq. But 3 and 4 were not unheard of for Vietnam. It was the same situation.
How did you manage to stay out of that?
I didn't, actually. Once I got back to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, I was there for a while, stationed with my dad. My dad was still in the Marine Corps for a while. And in Postal, and I got orders to go overseas. Now, there had been a gunnery sergeant that I was working for that he and I did not get along at all. I mean, not at all. In the morning, when I was sitting at my desk doing mail, out of the corner of my eye, I could see this guy standing in the door watching me, and he would find something to say to me daily. If it took me too long to find a parking place, he would be waiting for me at the door. Well, he got transferred to Washington, D.C., and he became a monitor in Washington, D.C. A monitor is the person that makes assignments for all of the people in the Marine Corps in their field. So if you're the postal monitor and there needs to be a person in Japan, your monitor will pick a person to go to Japan, okay? And that would be based on how long you've been in the States and your rotation cycle, etc. So I got orders to go to Vietnam, back to Vietnam. But before I left Camp Lejeune, my orders were modified to put me back in an infantry unit. So I went to see the colonel. I told him that I had just come back in the Marine Corps for a change of MOS from infantry to postal. So this is a mistake. You got to put me back in postal. He agreed, changed my orders back to postal. Well, the staging station for everybody going to Vietnam is Okinawa. So you leave the States, you go to Okinawa, and then from Okinawa to Vietnam. When I got to Okinawa, my orders had been changed back to infantry. Now, you're in a casual company, you're waiting for a flight to Vietnam, so every morning you fall out for formation. The people that's going to leave today, they call your name, tell you what time to get your gear ready and where you're going to depart from. So the lieutenant that was running the formation called me out, Woods, you are going to infantry outfit, yada, yada, yada. I said, oh, mistake. He said, what do you mean mistake? I said, I'm postal. And I just got this changed before I left stateside, so somebody changed it back, so we need to change that back. He said, take care of that when you get in country. I said, nope. We're going to take care of this before I get in country. We're going to take care of that right here in Okinawa. He said, Marine, I'm not asking you, I'm telling you. I said, yes, sir, I understand. But if you don't take care of it here, then I'm going to request mass with the President of the United States, and it's going to take me 13 months before I see him, and then I'll rotate. So either we take care of this here, or I want to see the President. So they put me in a casual company until they could work this out. And the casual company was a postal casual, and what we were doing was handling the mail from deceased people in Vietnam, and there were loads of that. So I spent that 13 months in Okinawa. So I had a monitor that was trying to get me killed. I'm sure of it. But I tricked him. I'm still here. The other things that were going on at that time is we can't talk about the Vietnam experience without talking about the environment that that operation took place in. That was only one thing that was happening in America. That was the civil rights movement that overlaps this. We had a president that had been assassinated. We had a candidate for president assassinated. We had 2 major civil rights leaders that had been assassinated. Women's movement was burning their bras. There was a hippie movement that was taking place. The Democratic National Convention in Chicago was under siege. People were demonstrating against an oppressive government as they saw it. Every serviceman that came back experienced the hatred that many Americans showed them. For the black serviceman, it was a little different. The difference is that Muhammad Ali says, I haven't lost anything in Vietnam, and that there's a civil rights movement going on here. And there are dogs being put on black people, and there are hoses being put on black people. Your fight is here on the streets of America, not in Vietnam. You're fighting to get Vietnamese rights when you don't have those same rights at home. Why are you in that uniform? So your own community had ostracized you. Processing that, was not easy. On the one hand, you had to understand that really didn't have a lot to do with the military. The military was just being seen as the symbol of American power. So you are attacking the symbol. It's not the warrior, it's the symbol that you are attacking. And I kind of worked my way to understanding that. The other thing that I understood is that what I'm seeing here is a better equal opportunity program in the military than the one that I have in the South. But you still had to deal with being ostracized by your own community. It wasn't an easy time for black military people. And I guess everybody handled that different ways. Some went AWOL. Some would have stayed in the military but got out. Some turned around and demonstrated against the military from a civil rights perspective, not from a Vietnam perspective. Some did both. It was an individual thing on how you process that, you know, and how you dealt with it. So.
And you, of course, stayed, once you went back in, you stayed in.
Yeah, I stayed for, I got a 20-year retirement, but you can actually retire in 20 years, at that time with 19 years and 6 months. If you had a 4-year enlistment and you re-enlisted at 3.5 years, then that other 6 months was given to you as admin time, so it counted. You can no longer do that. But that was grandfathered in for me, so I retired 19 years and 6 months. I had planned on staying longer. I enjoyed the military, some of it. The spit and polish, the competition and seeing who can look the best at formation in the morning. I had friends that we used to, you know, you had 14 sets of utilities. You had one set that you would get on a footlock and step in so you wouldn't break the crease in the back. You spent all night spit shining your shoes. You had starch and blocked your cover. And then at the 1 o'clock formation, you would change out of that into a new. That was for me. I really enjoyed that, and many of my friends did also. So we ran that competition. When I decided to get out of the Marine Corps, I had an aha moment. If you are a field grade officer, you have awesome responsibilities. You know, major, lieutenant colonel, and colonel. You control a regiment or a battalion, and the lives of everyone there is right in the palm of your hand. Not only do you control the lives of these people, the amount of equipment, the tactics that you control, it's awesome. It's really awesome. So I've always thought of these guys as super smart guys, right? When I was in San Diego, I ran the non-commissioned officer school when I got there. I was given a choice of 3 positions: go to my field postal, run the field house, or I can run NCO school. So I selected the non-commissioned officer school. And I had 5 young sergeants that worked for me. The non-commissioned officer school will take corporals and sergeants and teach them how to be non-commissioned officers. And the school was 6 weeks long, I think. So we'd run a 6-week class, 2-week break, run another 6-week class. So there were other schools in San Diego. There was drill instructor school, which I'd been a part of that. I'd been an instructor there. There was recruiter school, and I'd been a part of that. There was C school, this spit and polish. These are the guys that put on a performance when your base is visited by heavy brass, shoot the cannons and so forth. And the lowest school on that totem pole was non-commissioned officer school, and that doesn't work very well for me. So what is it that I can do to move the school into the spotlight? So when people speak of schools, they will speak with us, of us, in the same breath that they speak of other schools. So what I decided to do is right next door to us was an Air Force station. The ships come into San Diego, and there are Marines on ships. So if you're import and that coincides with our school cycle, then send your guys to our school. There was also a Navy group that was close to us. So I went to them and said, if you want to send your guys to our NCO school, send them. The very first group that took me up on that was Air Force. They sent a young man over that embarrassed all of the Marines. We went to the rifle range and fired. He fired the highest at the rifle range. He wiped them all out on the PFT test, right? So that was newsworthy for the base paper. So my boss wasn't aware of what I was doing. When I reported in, he had 2 hats. One hat was C school, one hat was NCO school. NCO school, gunning, you run the school, keep me out of trouble, and it's your school. I got to focus my attention over here. So he ran C school. So when he read about this in the paper, he came and said, what's going on? I said, well, I've invited the Air Force over, and I've invited the Navy over. My people have learned their regulations for inspections, trying to get some publicity for school. He said, this is great, you know. Well, the command in general got a hold to it, too. So during the officers' meeting, the colonel, who reports to the general, asked my boss to come to the next meeting and explain to the general what's going on. Well, he couldn't, so he says, you're going. I said, okay. So I'm on the agenda, sitting in the back, and I'm the last person on the agenda. So there are majors and lieutenant colonels and colonels. And at the time, there was a Professor Bloom that I think was out of Wisconsin who had come up with a learning program that was called the Bloom's Theory of Mastery. Whereas students didn't compete against other students, they competed against the learning objectives. The Marine Corps had said, this is what we're going to do. And I had instituted that into NCO school, but many of the other schools didn't like it and they hadn't instituted it, which was interesting because it was an order that you do it. So at this meeting, we had people telling the general why this wouldn't work. I'd been working that for 6 months. What do you mean why it won't work? It's a perfect program, you know. So my mouth kind of fell open. For first, I never would have dreamed these guys would be given any sort of excuse. Second, they certainly wouldn't have been accepting that excuse from me. So I found that these Captain Kirk Star Trek guys had clay feet. On that day, I decided I got to get out of the Marine Corps because they make more money, they have more responsibility, and now I understand that the only difference between them and me is a sheepskin. So I got to go do that. I've got to go do that. Now at that point I had 17 years in the Marine Corps. Never thought of myself as college material. I came from a poor background. We didn't talk college in my house. I thought you had to be a real smart guy to go to school. But if these guys can do it, I can do that standing on my head. So 17 years in, I got 3 more years to do. I did my 19.6, got out on Friday, enrolled in college on a Monday. So my life changed.
All right. How did the Marine Corps itself, you think, change at all during the time when you were in it? I mean, was it a different sort of organization or with a different attitude or way of doing things in 1980 than it was in 63?
Yeah, there was some change going through the Marine Corps, but you had older guys that, and the Bloom Theory of Mastery is an example. You know, it's an order, but this is the way we've been doing it for 100 years, so that had to be jammed down your throat. So change was real slow. You could see some change at the top. One of the changes that took place is because the Marine Corps TO prior to tactical readiness number, prior to Vietnam was 175,000. And of course the Marine Corps went up over 200,000 during the height of Vietnam. Well, prior to that, the Commandant of the Marine Corps set as a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but didn't have a vote unless it was a matter involving the Marine Corps. So he wasn't a co-equal at that point. But once the Marine Corps strength went up over 200,000, then he became a co-equal partner on the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So that was a change and put much pride in the Marine Corps to see that happen. There were other changes taking place. Certainly we had to adapt to jungle warfare training. I heard some officers talking one time, and I don't know if this is true, this is a story I'll relate to you, that when we first got in Vietnam, we went to the French and asked the French for the manuals that they used to fight the counterinsurgents in Vietnam. Well, the French was using the same manuals that we were using to fight jungle warfare in World War II. It was jungle warfare, but it was a different type. For example, if you were fighting jungle warfare in the Philippines, you were a foreign power fighting another foreign power in the Philippines. In Vietnam, you weren't fighting a foreign power, you were fighting the people in that country, the indigenous population. So it wasn't the same. We had to kind of learn on the job. So there were some changes, but a lot of things died hard and over time. So there was some change, but not a lot of change by the time I got out of the Marine Corps.
Now, was there a change, do you think, in the sorts of people who were joining the Marines or why they were going in or anything like that?
There are recruit categories. There's a category 4, category 3, category 2, and 1, I guess. And that's based on the score that you make on an ASVAB test. When I came in the Marine Corps was taking people that scored in the lower percentile, Cat 4s is what they were called. Well, anytime there's a military buildup, the requirements changed. There was also a draft during Vietnam, so the kind of people that were coming in may not have been the most desirable. The Marine Corps was processing people out of the Corps for bad conduct discharges on a regular basis. There were casual companies at just about every base that was filled with undesirables that were being processed out. Some of that had to do with the civil rights things that were taking place. There was a rebellion within the Corps. Some of that was a part of that. I think now you have a more educated military. There may even be a requirement for senior enlisted men to have some college, maybe even an associate degree for certain ranks. If you don't make a certain rank by a given time in the military, you have to get out. That's good and also poses some question. It's good because you can think through tactical situations better for your unit leaders. But at the same time that you start to think through these tactical situations, it poses questions on whether this is the best thing to do that you're being told to do. So I haven't seen this, but I would assume that given the way I think, even when I was an uneducated person, I raised questions about some of the things we were doing. And as an educated person now, I raise a lot of questions about things that should be done. So that may be a double-edged sword. I haven't seen any reports to see how the military responds to that.
All right.
Let me give you an example of that. The Marine Corps has a silent drill team. And these guys are sharp. They do sunset parades in Washington, D.C., and they perform all over the country. If you haven't seen them, you should, because they're seriously impressive. Each member of the silent drill team is probably 5 deep. Make a mistake, you're going to somebody to take your place, right? But they only take young Marines for this because of the discipline that's required and the demand that's put on them. The younger they are, the less they will rebel against this, okay? So you have to think about that. That's why the military, up until recently, when we're in combat, will only take a person that's a certain age to go through basic training. Because once you get older and more mature, there are things that you rebelled against. I think the education process is like that too. So I would be interested to see any reports that the military may have done on something like that.
All right. If you look back on the career that you had in the Marine Corps, what do you think the main effects of that experience were on you?
The Marine Corps makes you responsible. And I find that responsibility is something that a lot of people try to avoid. I don't mind being held accountable. I am responsible for my actions. What I expect as a result of being held accountable is recognition when I do well, and if punishment is necessary when I do poorly, it's all on me. It's my decision. It gave me self-assurance. It gave me early exposure to leadership. It made me understand the real meaning of friendship. Everybody is not your friend. Friends are a special category. I met people in the Marine Corps that are my friends today. It made me know that that I am capable of competing in any environment that I decide to compete in. And before I went in the Marine Corps, I had nowhere near that type of insurance. Society had told me that there were only certain things that I could do and a lot of things I couldn't do. The Marine Corps changed that for me.
All right. The whole thing makes for a very good story, so I'd just like to close here by thanking you for coming in and telling it to me today.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
All right. That's great. Okay, let me turn off the mics.
That sounds like rain.
Oh yeah. The good thing about it is it's really loud here, and I've done some interviews in here when it's been extra nervous. I thought, oh my God, we're not going to be able to hear anything when we play it. But it doesn't work that way. The mics are really very good at picking up what is close.
Oh, good.
So there's actually Francisco Vega, who's one guy I interviewed over here. He went on. He's one of my record holders for how long he went on, and we kept him at Elsa, Michigan. We kept him on schedule. But I remember doing one with him, and it was so noisy. Oh my God, it's awful. No,
Well,
no problem.
This almost distracted me. I said, oh,
Yeah.
God, this is your
Yeah.
pickup.
Yeah, but now you can kind of look at the experience through, and they don't you just put the mic in here. I wasn't running away, so it must have been okay.